Welcome to our PHP web course. In this class, we will learn about cookies and sessions. Let's first talk about the HTTP protocol. This is called a stateless protocol. It means that there is no connection between page and page. Therefore, there is no way for us to track a user, such as what you would do on Facebook or on Canvas. And there's no way to remember data being transferred from one page to another, which you might have in a multi-page form or a shopping cart. We can use cookies and sessions to keep track of users and remember data across pages. A cookie is a file stored on the user's computer. It is not erased when the user closes the browser if an expiration date has been set, which typically it has. However, the user can set preferences to not accept cookies, and therefore this cookie would be in vain. A session, on the other hand, is very much like a cookie. However, it is a temporary file stored on the server, not on the user's computer. It also is erased when the user closes the browser. However, if the user does set their preferences to not accept cookies, you can still use the session. The session can store more information than a cookie. So again, a cookie is a text file stored on the client computer for purposes of tracking or remembering a user. And PHP can create these cookies, retrieve them, work with the values, and also delete them. So once a cookie is created, the browser will store information on the local machine, and every time that machine or the user of that machine visits that website again, the cookie is sent up to the server, and the server can read it. So every time we land on a page, these cookies are sent back and forth, and data can be added or modified. A cookie can only be read by the website that sent it, so one website cannot read another website's cookies. As I said earlier, the user can disable cookies, and that would be done using Google Chrome version 80 as an example in the Settings menu, Privacy and Security, ultimately looking at the cookie settings. A cookie is created using the setCookie function. The setCookie function must appear before the opening HTML tag, and we place all of our processing code on top of the doc type anyway. There are 7 possible parameters that can be set for the setCookie function. The only required parameter is the name. The cookie has to have a name. Other parameters are optional. Again, the cookie has to have a name similar to every form element has to have a name. That is how we identify the cookie. So I would like to go over the parameters. The name is required. It identifies that individual cookie. And you want to think of a cookie like a variable. The value. For purposes of learning, you can hard code in a value. However, typically values come from a form or some other type of user interaction. You can set an expiration date. If it is not set, or if it's set to 0, that cookie will expire the minute the browser is closed. You can set the path on the server where the cookie would be available, should you wish it to be available to only certain folders. The default is the entire folder, meaning from the root down. You can also specify a domain. This would pertain to if you have a large website with subdomains. You can confine a cookie to subdomains. The default is set for the entire domain. The secure option, when set to true or 1, indicates the user must be using HTTPS to work with the cookie. The HTTP only option, when set to true or 1, means that the cookie is only accessible through the HTTP protocol. Therefore, you cannot access it by languages such as JavaScript which could result in a security issue. So most typically, when you create a cookie, you would be using the setCookie function, and you would be specifying a name. The value, as I said, it typically comes from a form. The expiration is optional, but you probably would want to set that. This is an example of how you would set an expiration date. You would use the PHP time function, which essentially holds all of the seconds from January 1st, 1970 up until the present day. And then you would add some values. Here is how we're setting this cookie 10 years into the future by multiplying 10 times 365 for the days in a year, times 24 for the hours in a day, times 60 for the minutes in an hour, times 60 for seconds in a minute. Because we want to work with seconds, that formula will give you 10 years worth of seconds added to the seconds in the time function, puts us 10 years into the future. Should you wish to delete a cookie, there is no function for that. How you actually do that is to set the expiration date at any time in the past. Now, I am using the same 10-year formula to set it 10 years in the past. However, I can set it 10 seconds in the past, and that will work just as well. We have a $_cookie superglobal variable, just like we have a $_post and a $_server. The $_cookie variable is technically an associative array. It holds all of the name value pairs in that cookie. You can easily test your cookie using the print_r function, passing it that variable $_cookie, and it will show you the array of name value pairs. Similar to what we do with radio and checkboxes, you can use the isset function to determine whether or not a cookie variable has a value. And here we're using if not isset, and we have the cookie, and if the condition was true, you can just do an echo for your own testing purposes. And if it is not true, you can do an else with an echo for your own testing purposes. From a programming point of view, you would probably have some code inside those curly braces. So let's look at how we retrieve a cookie value. First, let's recall how we set it. Using the setCookie function, we give the cookie a name and a value, as we see here. We use the $_cookie variable, and we pass the parameter, the name of the cookie, and that will return the value. This is very similar to the $_post, where we pass the variable, the name of the form element, and it returns the value. So the process is similar because we are working with associative arrays. So how would we work with data in a form? Typically, we would store a value from a form, as we see an example here, in a PHP variable, and then we would use that variable as the value of the cookie we are creating. And here we see the setCookie function creating the cookie called the _name. And now when we echo back a result, we can concatenate with $_cookie the name, which is the name of the cookie, and it will return the value of that variable, which holds the value of the form element. I would like to point out that the $_cookie array will not return a value if it's inside the double quotes. You need to concatenate. Sessions are very similar to cookies. They are text files stored on the server. Their main purpose is storing information that's going to be used across multiple pages. Typically, you see them used in shopping carts, multi-page forms, and password-protected pages. The location of this temporary file is determined by a setting in the php.ini file, so you can actually see that file on your computer when that session is active. A session is created using the session_start function. At that point, PHP creates a unique identifier for that section. There is a cookie identified by PHP SESSID that is sent to the user's computer. This contains a reference to the session on the web server, and that is how the server keeps track of the session. Even though this is stored similar to a cookie, it can still work even if the cookies are disabled. A typical session lasts about 24 minutes or earlier if the user leaves the page. This is set in the php.ini file. So to create a session, you use the session_start function. The session_start function must be the first line of code at the top of your PHP script, and it must be on every page. If you don't have that function on every page, the session is not going to exist for that page. As I said earlier, a unique session ID is generated for every session. You really don't need that, but I would like to show you how to view it. We have a session_ID function which will return the unique session ID. Again, this is automatically generated by the server. If you were to store that in a variable of your choice and echo back that variable, you could see the value. A session variable is set using the $_session and in brackets identifying that variable with a name. So we have the name of the variable on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is the value that will be stored in that session variable. You can see the value of that session variable in the echo statement as I have shown here. Again, this is very similar to $_post, giving it the name of the form element. It returns the value. So let's see how we can set a session using a form value. So here we have a value from the form being stored in a variable $_name, and now we will set a session variable called login, and we will store $_name in that variable. When we echo back the session variable name, it will return the value that came from the form. Similar to $_cookie, we have $_session, which is a superglobal variable. Just like the cookie variable, it is an associative array. It lists all of the session name value pairs. And should you want to use the print_r function, you can display all of the information that is stored in that session global variable. We can also check to see if the session variable has a value by using the isset function. So I have a similar example here using not_isset, and you can just use an echo statement so that you can see whether it is set or not. If you wanted to set an expiration on a session, you would need to use your own logical PHP code. Here is one approach that I have used. Here I am creating a session variable called expire, and I am setting it to a time of 30 minutes in the future. Then I use an if to check the current time, and I'm seeing if it's greater than the value of the session variable named expire, which is 30 minutes in the future. And if the current time is greater than that, I will call the session_destroy function, which ends the session. Notice I have an echo statement and then the exit, which terminates any other processing on this page. You can empty or delete a session. If you wanted to remove all the session variables, there is a function session_unset. or you can just clear it out by setting $_session brackets. You can also destroy or delete the session, as we have just seen, session_destroy.